Hello and good morning, beautiful people of Mother Earth. Today's story is a common trope that we've heard all too often. It was their fault. They chose a high-risk lifestyle. Maybe if they weren't addicted to drugs. Every reason under the sun to paint the victim as the scapegoat, rather than pointing fingers at the murderer. This is Ireland's unsolved murder of Sinead Kelly. My name is Eli, and this is Murder in the Morning. My sources for today come from CBS, mymythbuster.wordpress.com, Wikipedia, an Irish Times article, and the rest I will list down below. Ireland has, like every other country, a long history of high tensions and gritty violence, and in the 1990s, Dublin was no different. Crime families, mobs, wannabe syndicates desperately clinging on to the old ways, and although those groups aren't our focus today, they may very well have played a role. And in 1993, sex workers specifically were dealt a very shitty hand. According to the source My Mythbuster, authored by a former Irish sex worker, quote, "The Sexual Offences Act of 1993 recriminalized soliciting, which was the only fully independent sex work possible at that time for the first time in 10 years. One of the negative effects was to destroy the huge benefits of decriminalization in terms of safety and peace of mind, as well as all but eradicating pimps and underage kids from the big Southside red light districts. Decriminalized, we had led almost normal lives with an extra helping of stigma. But the 1993 Sexual Offences Act blew that away and instead put a nerve-wracking nightmare in its place, with no alternative means of income available to escape to. One of the lateral effects, I don't think you could call it negative or positive, was to open the door to a wave of young drug addicts to fill the vacuum left by many of the independent sex workers who had been driven indoors to work for pimps by fear of arrest or exposure." End quote. Not a good time for sex workers at all in Ireland. And I felt so blessed to have come across an article by a former Irish sex worker who had written on this topic. Anywho, one such young woman in the industry was 21-year-old Sinead Kelly. She was raised 5 miles north of Dublin in a small community named Santry, and it said that Sinead had a pretty pleasant family, pretty normal life with 2 siblings. However, life being life, Sinead fell down a dark path of drug addiction, specifically heroin, and by age 19, this was leading her towards sex work in order to pay for said addiction. A sad story that we hear all too often. However, her family did not want to give up on her. According to the thread by Danny Boy, quote, "Her mother remortgaged the family home on Old Town Avenue to get her daughter Sinead the best treatment possible. They brought her to the Rutland Center in Dublin in late 1997, and Sinead's stay there was a positive and helpful one. And for much of the remainder of her life, she was heroin-free," end quote. Unfortunately, at age 21, one fateful night 2 months before her murder, Sinead was raped after a night out with friends. Police found the man who raped her, but Sinead chose not to press charges when she learned that the man had children. She was quoted as saying she didn't want to ruin the kids' lives. And I applaud her for that, but it also sucks that he got away with it. And this, naturally, caused her to relapse. She fell down that hole again. This time, Sinead had been living in the St. Teresa's Gardens on the south side of Dublin. And the 1998 Irish Times article says, quote, "She was known to Gardaí, it's Gardaí, right? Yes. As one of the group of up to 220 women who operate as prostitutes in the area from Grand Canal to Fitzwilliam Square," end quote. On June 21st, 1998, Sinead Kelly was found murdered with multiple stab wounds near the canal in Herbert Place. People living nearby heard screaming just before 2 a.m., and called authorities, who found Sinead lifeless. Responding officers later described this attack as frenzied. Initially, authorities thought this might be related to a vicious assault in the same area that happened only a week prior, but unfortunately were unable to connect the two. According to Wikipedia, quote, Gardy believed that Kelly was lured to her death and that the murder may be linked to a drug debt she owed to a heroin dealer. Rosie Lakes, a heroin addict and sex worker herself, alleged that she was given heroin from her and Kelly's dealer in exchange for pointing Kelly out to this dealer's associates. Rosie Lakes was the state's only witness in Kelly's murder, and the DPP recommendation that these men be charged was dropped following the death of Rosie Lakes from tainted heroin, end quote. And so, investigators were stumped. And I didn't think of it until now, but is there a chance that Rosie Lakes and Sinead Kelly's dealer had tainted that heroin for Rosie to kill her on purpose, since she was kind of involved and she was the only witness? She was very involved as the only witness. That just adds another layer of what if. Authorities desperately arrested 2 members of a Crumlin-based crime family in hopes of shaking something loose, but yet another dead end. And not too many months after this, according to Wikipedia, authorities linked the murder of another attack on a sex worker in September of 1998 in Dublin. During this attack, a 28-year-old woman was stabbed with a Stanley knife on Benburb Street, which was a known area for sex work at the time. And authorities believe that the same drug-dealing gang that killed Kelly targeted this woman, as she could potentially help Gardy investigate her murder. But again, that lead went nowhere. It sounds amazing and then fizzles out, over and over again. Investigators again looked helpless in this fight for justice, and they kind of were. The case went cold and unsolved for years, Sinead's family fighting for more to be done every step of the way. It wasn't until 2017 that investigators received another tip. An anonymous source came forward claiming that one person involved with Sinead's murder was also involved in the December 2000 disappearance of Trevor Deely. And that case is an entirely different can of worms. I wouldn't be surprised if you've heard of this before, but if not, here is a brief synopsis of that. Quote, on December 8th of 2000, Trevor Deely, a 22-year-old Irish man, disappeared in Dublin. He had been walking home around 4 a.m. from his work Christmas party, having stopped at his office on the way to retrieve an umbrella and arrange certain things for his shift the next day. He was seen on a security camera entering and leaving his office building. The footage shows him speaking to a man dressed in black before he entered the building, and this man has never been identified. Trevor was later seen on another security camera in front of a bank he passed on Haddington Road as he headed home on foot. And this is the last image that exists of Trevor. Despite continuous investigations, his disappearance remains a mystery. His disappearance remains a mystery, end quote. However, authorities were never able to actually connect Sinead's murder to Trevor's disappearance. And that's unfortunate, since Trevor's case has gained much more attention in the media back then, over the years, and even today, when I've never been to Ireland, and I've always wanted to go, and honestly, that's sometimes what motivates me to pick cases. I'm like, unsolved, insert country here, and I did that with Ireland, and Trevor Deely was all over the place, but hardly anything on Sinead Kelly. It's sad. And the media she did receive back in the 90s was pitiful. The Irish Independent described sex workers in the area of the attack as, quote, junkies. The Sunday World referred to Sinead Kelly as a, quote, teen hooker, although she was clearly 21. They couldn't even bother to get her basic facts correct. Was it really that difficult to be empathetic or caring? Is it still that difficult? It seems to be for some people. Authorities, again, let her case grow cold, and to this day, Sinead's murderer walks free. I hate to leave you with such a frustrating and I wrote satisfying, unsatisfying ending for the story, but that's the reality of it. But before I go, I would like to leave you with a snippet from the Care Too Much thread that I got a lot of this information from. Quote, Irish tabloid media in 1998 covered her murder in sensationalist fashion, much like they had for Belinda Pereira 18 months earlier. Hooker, junkie, crack addict, and hopeless addict were all used to describe her. The later label is infuriating false, aside from utterly dehumanizing. There was always hope for addicts. Nobody is beyond saving. Sinead demonstrated a willingness to turn her life around. She had loving parents, a brother, and a sister to help her. She was thriving in that endeavor until a cowardly man violently shattered all of that progress. When you Google Sinead Kelly in 2023 and click on news, there's nothing. Sinead did sex work for a mere 3 months of her short 21 years, yet she was known as a, quote, prostitute. She was trying to overcome addiction, yet she was known as an addict. All that remains are labels. It's like she didn't even exist as a human being, one with feelings, fears, and hopes. Sinead wasn't a drug addict or, quote, prostitute. Those were difficulties she faced courageously. Sinead Kelly was a young woman trying to better herself in education and attempting to recover from addiction. And sexual assault, I might add. Forgotten quickly by the public, but remembered forever by her family, end quote. A passage much more beautiful and honorable than anything I could have typed up to end her story. And that, my friends, is the unsolved murder of Sinead Kelly. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me cover her case, or maybe just felt something from her story. Sinead has every right for justice, and I simply hope one day she finds it. Thank you all again from the bottom of my heart for taking the time to listen in today. And if you would like a bit extra, I invite you to hang around after the music. Okie dokie. Bye-bye. Woo! Alrighty, folks. We're solving cold cases left and right nowadays. This is wonderful, wonderful news. And yeah, today's no different. This is titled U.S. Murder Suspect Confesses to Decades-Old Florida Cold Case After DNA Leads to Arrest by Carrie Breen of CBS. Quote, a Florida man has confessed to murdering another man in 1997, closing a cold case that's more than a quarter century old, officials said. Stephen Edenfield, or Edenfield, was found stabbed and beaten inside his Tampa, Florida condo on February 1st of 1997. The night before he was found dead, Edenfield had gone out twice, Sheriff's Office cold case investigator Dan Bendig said on Unfinished Business, a podcast run by the agency. First, he had gone out to dinner with his brother and sister, and then before midnight, he left the complex again, returning around 12:50 a.m. on February 1st. Edenfield briefly spoke to a security guard because he had forgotten his remote to enter the complex gate, Bendig said. He told the security guard that the driver of the car behind him was also with him. So the security guard let both cars into the complex, but did not get a good look at the driver of the second car. Bendig said that Bendig, it's B-E-N-D-I-G, not bending. Bendig said that neighbors started hearing, quote, violence in the house and calls for help within an hour of Edenfield returning home. 3 neighbors also told police they had heard, quote, some sort of disturbance. Around 2 a.m, the security guard was conducting rounds at the complex and saw a, quote, dark shadow near Edenfield's apartment. Realized it was a person, but did not get a good look at this person's face. Dang, this security guard's not very good. Come on, security guy. Secure, man. Edenfield's brother found him dead in the apartment the next day. There was evidence of a violent struggle, and the word and the word, quote, greed was written on Edenfield's bedroom in blood. There were no signs of forced entry, and an initial investigation did not lead to any arrests. The Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit reopened the investigation in 2022. The unit worked with Othram Labs, a forensic genetic genealogy company, and Othram Labs said that it used forensic evidence from the initial investigation to develop a comprehensive DNA profile for an unknown suspect. That profile was then used in a forensic search to find new investigative leads, said the company. In 2024, a forensic search found that the DNA profile was also linked to an unsolved 2005 sexual assault case in Illinois. Brandon Gliha had been identified as a suspect in the case. Police turned their attention to Brandon, now 47, living in Tampa. They found he had been arrested on an Illinois forgery warrant just weeks before and was in custody. Investigators from the Cold Case Unit interviewed Brandon at this police facility. During the interview, he confessed to Edenfield's murder, and on Monday, he was charged with first-degree murder and robbery with a deadly weapon. Online jail records now show Brandon is being held at the Tampa jail, and a bond amount has not been set. Edenfield's sister, who he had dined with the night before his death, died before Brandon's arrest, and Edenfield's brother, who had found his body, thankfully is alive to see this. Quote, for 28 years, Stephen's family has waited for answers. Today, we can finally give them some measure of peace, said Sheriff Chad Chronister. Chad Chronister, in the news release. No family should have to endure this kind of pain for so long. While nothing can erase the loss they have suffered, we hope that knowing that justice has been served brings them comfort. End quote. Me too. Again, it's just, I love seeing cold case after cold case after cold case every week get solved. And there's multiple to choose from. Obviously none as big as like the Golden State Killer, things of that nature, but who cares? Every single one is a win, and they're only going to get more abundant as we move forward in time. Yeah, that's how we're going to end it. Alrighty. But seriously, thank you all so much for listening in today. Again, it's wonderful. I appreciate each and every one of you. So have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you folks next week. Okie dokie. Bye-bye. Love you.